All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition, a special edition of our Justice in Pieces guest speaker series. And today we're going to look at confronting anti-Black racism, and we have a panel of three amazing speakers here for us today. First, we have Ryan Watkins, who is a partner at Whitten and Lublin. Then we have Deborah Moriah, who is a paralegal and founder and director of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. And then we have Leon Presner, who is the owner and founder of Defendant Legal Services and a background in policing that he will share with you. So first of all, maybe let's start with you, Ryan. Maybe you can tell us a bit about who you are and your background in the legal profession.
Sure. So as JP said, I'm a partner here at Whitten and Lublin. We practice exclusively in the area of employment law, represent both employees and employers throughout the entire employment relationship, all the way from hiring to firings. I've been a practicing lawyer now for going on almost 10 years now. And it's been a great journey from all the way from articling to being a junior associate, all the way up to the partnership level and everywhere in between. And I've really been able to see, I've seen a lot in terms of, on Bay Street and what diversity or the lack thereof looks like in the legal field, especially for lawyers. And I'm happy to speak on that today.
And next, Deborah, perhaps you could tell us more about your background.
Sure. So I'm actually, first of all, I was a writer and an editor for about 10 years before I decided to make a little bit of a switch in my career. I have a brother who's a lawyer. He encouraged me to pursue law. I wasn't keen on going to law school at that age, so I decided that I was going to try out paralegal studies to see if it was something I was interested in, and I loved it. I was licensed in 2016 and worked in immigration, accident benefits, and a few other areas of law before opening up my own practice. And then I started working in small claims, human rights, and criminal injuries compensation board. And basically this year, the biggest accomplishment that I have so far, I'm really excited about. I've worked with another group of Black paralegals and one lawyer to create the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. We decided to come together in July 2020 to discuss what it would look like for mentorship for paralegals. I found that when I started my firm, there wasn't a whole lot of mentorship opportunities out there for specifically paralegals who are racialized, or even legal professionals who are racialized, to get information from people who have been there before them. We do face very unique opportunities and as well unique challenges. So there are things out there other than just practice management and how to do certain things that we will face, and discrimination is a big one of them. So the Association of Black Paralegals is basically around to provide mentorship for existing paralegals, for students. We want to provide mentorship and help them discover if law is something they want to do. We also are looking to provide scholarship opportunities, and we are looking to provide more increased and improved access to justice for Black and other racialized Ontarians who are facing civil matters that have to do with racism and discrimination.
And finally, Leon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leon Presner, and I am a paralegal, and I've been a paralegal for approximately 3.5 years. I previously was a police officer for the Durham Regional Police Service for 27.5 years. So I'll have quite a varied and a different sort of point of view of law and how I approach law. And I can see both sides of the paradigm of the enforcement side and then, of course, the representation and advocacy side. My practice is a multidisciplinary practice. It's Defendant Legal Services Professional Corporation, and I have 3 different lines of business. I have the paralegal side of the business, so I'm quite varied in that. I do mainly human rights complaints, employment law, traffic defense, small claims, and landlord and tenant, and then some other miscellaneous things outside of that. Then I have my second discipline that I have at my firm is that I'm a private investigative agency. So interestingly, I wanted a little bit of the police department in my private life. So I made sure that I had all the requisite tools to be able to do effective private investigation work. So what I do for mainly legal professionals is that I do skip tracing, which is locating people to be either served or for litigation. I also do sort of boots on the ground private investigation work, which I have ex-police officers who work for me who do that, and process serving. So that's the second discipline. And the third discipline, which I recently started, is I am a RCMP accredited fingerprinting and background search provider. So I can also do, so for immigration or say a passport or a background check and those types of things, I can do all those types of stuff. So quite a varied firm, legal firm, which I've sort of taken the things from my past and things that I've learned today, and I've put them all together. My background in my family, we have a lot of law in my family. My aunt was recently the Chief Justice of Ghana in West Africa, and she just retired. So I've spoken to her about many things that is going on here, and she actually started a paralegal program in West Africa or in Ghana through some work that I've been doing behind the scenes. So that's a little bit about me.
And thank you all three of you for sharing that. And perhaps maybe we can start with you, Ryan, about, I think it was last summer or roughly around there, you had looked at the percentage of partners at these big Bay Street firms that were Black. And can you maybe share a little bit about that investigation there and what you found and what those numbers are even like?
Sure. So, when I obtained the partnership at my firm, it was a great achievement for me and my family, being one of the only people to go to university and then go on to law school. But there was also a sense of emptiness because I looked around at my peers and colleagues, and I realized there's not many that look like me, and certainly on Bay Street. And it kind of got me thinking, why exactly is that? Why aren't there more Black partners on Bay Street? And the figures are startling. I think there are 55,000 lawyers in Ontario. But when we look at Bay Street specifically and the partnership there, the percentage is only roughly 3% of partners on Bay Street that are Black. And just looking at the startling figure like that, it kind of shakes you to say, why is that the case, and what can we do about it to ensure that those numbers go up dramatically? And so that's where I started off at looking at individual firms. I had to physically go on their websites, because one thing that I found is that a lot of these big firms were very secretive about their diversity numbers and statistics. And so I had to physically go on these websites and look at pictures of the lawyers to see are they diverse or not, or are they a person of color or not. And after manually counting and getting to that 3% figure, it just confirmed what I was seeing while I was walking to work, that there's just not enough people of color on Bay Street. And so after that, I started to really dive deep in why that is. And there are a few reasons that I came up with. And number one, it starts with the pipeline. And so to become a lawyer, you have to write the law school admissions test to get in. And that test is really skewed towards people that can afford to take private courses and hire private tutors to really get them to get the best mark that they can on the law school admissions test. And oftentimes people of color may come from a socioeconomic background where they can't afford to do that. They can't afford to hire a private tutor. And that really puts people of color at a disadvantage who don't have the economic means to do so. And that's where you start kind of, from the beginning, that pipeline where, people of color are just not being represented in law school. So of course, you're not going to have a lot of Black partners or people of color broadly if at the law school level you're not seeing that same representation as well. And then after that, it gets even deeper because these Bay Street firms, after your first year, going into your second year, you do on-campus interviews. And during the interview process, these firms are able to, select the students that they want. And so what do they base it on? Oftentimes there's a criteria just to get in the door, you need, certain grades. So right there, you're cutting off, X amount of people there. And then if you're lucky, being a person of color, to get an interview, the people that are interviewing you, because there's not a lot of Black lawyers, they're likely going to be white, right? And coming from a different background than you are. And I always use the example of, oftentimes you'll see, the people at these firms, they're not as culturally diverse and well diverse in culture. And what tends to happen is that they hire people like them, whether it's a conscious or unconscious bias. So you're going into an interview already at a disadvantage. A lot of I call it the country club mentality, where a lot of these, partners, they like to golf. They like to go and to the country club and their golf courses. And a lot of people of color don't participate in golf. And so, that's one example where normally in an interview you may hit it off talking about, hey, did you watch the Masters or whatever golf tournament was on? And you can talk about those things. A lot of people of color, don't participate in golf or country club type of events. We can often name Tiger Woods, but when we look at the PGA Tour, how many other Black golfers are out there, right? And so that further leads to not what these partners would say, you don't fit in, you're not what we're looking for. And that again could be conscious or unconscious, but it really boils down to, you don't look like us, you don't participate in the things that we do. And so it's hard to get one of those jobs at the big firm. And really in law school, the on-campus interviews, that kind of sets your path so early on. And, we're talking about in your second year, that sets the path of your career, or potentially it could, because you go on to summer at the firm, then you go on to article, then you become an associate, and you become a partner. So, it's really at that level where things, you start to see where these tragic figures of 3% come from. It starts at the beginning.
All right, now, Deborah, you created the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, and certainly yesterday you had an event there with the Ontario Paralegal Association that you were involved with, which was their first event for Black History Month, and a CPD there as well. Where did you see, as a paralegal, in terms of your perspective, what was being done and why the need for the creation of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals? And I know you touched on it a bit there before, but what are you hoping to accomplish with your organization?
I would say the main thing that we're hoping to accomplish is to give Black students, Black individuals who want to come into this profession a fighting chance, really. When I started, I was lucky enough to have somebody who already was working in law, who had friends and people he could refer me to. And if I hadn't had that, if I didn't have a brother working in the industry, I don't know where I would have gotten my first job, to be honest. I did my articling with a a colleague of his, a good friend of his. From there, I actually met a paralegal who had a firm there, and I had assisted him with something, and then he remembered me and hired me later. But other than that, the time leading up to him randomly calling me and offering me a job, I sent out a resume every single day for about 2 months and couldn't get one response. So it's really difficult, I find, and from the experience of speaking with other racialized and Black paralegals, mostly Black paralegals, it's difficult for us to find opportunities once we even have our studies. So even in school, I can even go back to school. For me, I grew up in rural Nova Scotia. So we were always the only Black family. I was always the only Black child in my class. It was just us. So I kind of got used to being the only one. So when I was in school doing paralegal studies, it wasn't something that registered. The fact that I think there were maybe 3 Black people in the entire class, and we're in Toronto, but that's what it was. There were 3 of us. And it's not something that I even really noticed. But it was when I got into the field that I realized that there seemed to be a barrier for us. Nobody was hiring. Even when I would get interviews, they would be impressed by my resume. I would do a phone interview, they would like that. They'd see me, and I guess everything would just kind of fall away. All of a sudden, I wasn't qualified and I wouldn't get calls back. So yeah, so I started working at that personal injury firm and just really worked hard. I was an office manager and did a lot of the work, and it really helped me learn how to run a practice. And like I said, I was lucky to get there. But then when I went into an immigration firm, I felt the microaggressions. I was working as a receptionist at first and moved on to work as a legal assistant. And then I was being offered a promotion, and I was excited about that. I was going to be working as a paralegal at an immigration firm. And as soon as that was announced, I started getting these aggressions from some of the other lawyers at the firm. And a lot of the work that I was doing before, they would push more work on me. And microaggressions, it's something that's kind of hard to explain if you haven't experienced it. But it's basically just people kind of doing passive things to kind of put you in your place and keep you in your place. And that's what it feels like. It just feels like they don't want you to move up. And so I made a decision at that time that it was time for me to move on. And then from that, it was a spontaneous decision to open my own firm. But as I was explaining before, when I tried to get a mentor through the Law Society, there was no one. I tried for months and they couldn't seem to match me with anybody. The first person they matched me with had never been in private practice, so she declined. And so I waited and waited and couldn't find anyone and had to rely on just kind of calling different people whenever I needed help with something. And I realized that there's this barrier there. For some reason, there's nothing that exists, especially, first of all, for paralegals, there's not really a mentorship program that exists. But for Black paralegals, because there are these unique challenges that we face, I felt that what I wanted was a mentor who had been in the steps before me. Somebody who knows what it's like to show up in court and show up as Black, to show up as a Black woman, to show up as a Black woman who's a paralegal. Like it's very difficult. I've had instances in courtrooms where judges have made snide remarks to lawyers that were next to me, and I'm there and I'm shocked that this is happening because I'm thinking this is the justice system. I'm supposed to have some type of, there should be some civility here, but that was missing. There have been times where I've had judges there was one judge actually at a settlement conference who threw an endorsement record at me and refused to look me in the eye. So these little things that kept happening, and I realized I can handle it because I have thick skin. I grew up that way. It's something that I'm used to. But what about the people out there who have never experienced overt racism in this manner? What happens when they walk into these situations how do they survive this? A lot of them don't. A lot of times what they do is they want to quit. They don't want to keep going, and they end up going and doing another career. And on top of that, the ones who can't find jobs as legal assistants or receptionists, and a lot of them don't, they end up having to go out on their own. And when you're out on your own, you're lost if you don't have the support of maybe a family member or somebody that you know. And so we created the association because we wanted to have a safe space for not just Black, but racialized paralegals and even students to come and learn more about the profession and be able to connect them with mentors who are willing to give their time. And as I mentioned as well, there is an advocacy fund that we're creating for helping with doing work that relates to discrimination and racism in the community, because I find that a lot of times people who come with human rights cases and things like that, it's very difficult for them to get representation. It's a free process, so you can go through and do it yourself, but it's difficult to do on your own if you don't have the expertise. And so when you go and you're going out and you're looking for someone to help you, a lot of times they can't afford, because these are people who can't afford to pay for representation. So they end up being sent away. And so I think it's a shame. It was one of the things that was really hard for me when I was working in that field, is to see people who we just couldn't help because they couldn't afford it. So one of the initiatives that we're starting is that we will have in place with the mentorship program, paralegals working with experienced lawyers who are helping people at a discounted rate or for free, depending on what their income is. And then, as I mentioned, we also want to be able to really support students, because I think that one of the reasons that there weren't a lot of Black students or even racialized students in the classrooms is because I think there's somewhat of I don't know if fear is the right word, but maybe they feel intimidated to be in those spaces. They don't feel like they belong in those spaces. Yet many of them have those dreams. And I think that they should have the right to pursue them, and they should be comfortable enough to pursue them. And so those are our main goals. And of course, we also want to be able to help paralegals navigate racism and discrimination in the workplace. So when you show up in the courtroom and you experience those types of things, or you experience them from your clients or from your colleagues, you know how to navigate it. You know how to be able, not necessarily bounce back, because as we know, if you're Black, you know that as many times as racism happens and these incidents happen, bouncing back isn't a reality, but at least knowing how to deal with it. What do you do? In my case, I was younger and I was new to the profession and felt that I didn't really want to go out there and start complaining about things that were happening to me. I felt intimidated to do so. And so I didn't say a thing. And that was at the advice of other people. They said, is it worth it? It could be career suicide, maybe just leave it alone. But I really think that if we talk about it, it is something that will happen less. And so we want to encourage people to not just, have a place, not just go out and complain about it if they don't feel like it, but at least have a place to talk about it and to figure out how to deal with it the next time it happens. And then we also want to teach all paralegals that racism does happen. There is systemic injustice in the justice system. If you see it, denounce it and do something about it. Because if we never say anything, then it's just going to keep happening. So those are the main goals that we have. And we are looking to launch our program at the end of this year. In the meantime, we have a series of webinars that will be starting. The first one on April 10th. And it's about navigating racism and discrimination in the workplace.
And Leon, certainly you have a varied background there, 27 years, as you put it there, in Durham Police. And certainly you must have witnessed a lot of anti-Black racism there. And then you made the decision to go and become a paralegal. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit of your experiences there and what you're hoping to accomplish now that you have a diverse practice there at Defendant Legal Services, specifically being a Black paralegal.
Yes. Where do I start? Well, I was a police officer for a number of years, 27 and a half to be exact. And it was funny, maybe I can sort of start from the very beginning of why I became a police officer. And I'll try to make it short because it's a very interesting story. That when I was a teenager, I grew up in a town called Port Perry. And of course, we were one of two, racialized families there, and of maybe a population of, at that time, maybe about 10,000. And I had a police officer neighbor who was a police sergeant who was absolutely tyrannical and horrendous, to the point where he made it very clear to my family and my mother, who was a probation officer at the time, that we didn't belong there, and even declared to my mother that he was going to catch me one day doing something. And, I was a good kid and nerdy kid, actually, computers and that type of thing. And I actually worked at a Vachon, which is they made butter tarts and stuff. So I worked there on the weekends and stuff. So I would go there on the weekend, work all weekend, and I had a car at 16. So I was a responsible kid. I didn't, do anything bad or anything wrong. But there were times when I would come out of this place, which was just up the street, and the officer would be sitting in his car watching me, and he would actually literally follow me from the factory slowly in his police car home. So these were the types of harassment as a kid that I experienced. So there was one point it was on Halloween of one year. My father said, "Hey, you're too old." I think it was 15 at the time, 15 or 16, maybe 15. "And stay in, let's, play games and just, stay inside. You're too old for Halloween." Well, thank goodness I did, because the next day on November 1st, there was very, very loud banging at my front door. And it was that police officer who came to the door and said, "I saw your son vandalize my house." What? My father's like, "What?" And we got into an argument, and my father, thank God, very assertive person, basically told him that he was a liar. He said that he was a racist, and he said that if you don't get off my property, I will physically throw you off my property. I don't care if you're a police officer or not. You're here unlawfully, and this is a setup. So after that, I was terrified and everything about that because my father had stated this to a police officer. And my neighbor, who was also a police sergeant for Durham Regional Police at the time, he was a really nice guy. And I told him the stories of what was happening with this guy. And he said to me, "Leon, if you want to make change, you got to get in there and get within." And that was my motivation. So it was funny because I actually had two motivations. So I got accepted into the law program at the time at York University with the aspirations of being a lawyer, but I chose policing. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because of my experiences. And ironically, this particular police officer, it was actually really incredible. The moment I got in and sworn, that particular officer ended up getting arrested, charged, and actually went to jail for various things. Not surprising. So this was sort of my introduction to the police force. And let me tell you something. There is no place where I had my eyes wide open than that place. And I don't know if people have been watching the news or people have been seeing what's going on. I'll let you come to your own conclusions. I'm not going to state otherwise. But let me tell you something. Being a racialized person is difficult as a police officer. Let me tell you, it is very, very difficult because you're sort of the meat in the sandwich. You are expected by the majority to toe the line. You've got an oath of secrecy. You've got all kinds of things, regulatory things and informal things that keep you in line. And then it's the reality of things that happen out there where, I witnessed somebody let a dog out to a bunch of kids that were running away, and the dog ended up biting these kids. Can't say anything, right? I've I can't even, there's so many different things that I've witnessed and internalized. I could spend all day, all night talking about it. While I was there, I decided, you know what, I'm a smart guy, whatever. I want to be a sergeant because I'm an aspiring person, intelligent person. So I went in their promotional process and I sat on their promotional process for 13 years. Never quite good enough. Need more mentoring. Whatever. Can't make good decisions. Who knows? I don't know. I think it's absolutely horrendous that you could be treated with such disdain. And Deborah spoke about microaggressions. Oh my gosh, death by a million cuts. Death by a million cuts. You're working there. You have more education than the rest of the people there. You have more aspirations. You do 10 times the work and you're treated like a dog. The reason why I can say this is because I've never been, it's one thing about me, I'm going to tell the truth about different things and how things really are. And when I was there, I told the truth of things and what really is going on there. Right to their face. So they all know. They could be watching right now. There you go. Because it's the truth. So anyway, part of my aspirations, so let's fast forward a little bit. So I'm in year 24, 20, around there. I'm getting tired of doing the same job that I was doing when I was 21 years old when I got hired. I'm stuck on the road, pushing the car, giving people tickets. Not very challenging, considering I've been doing that for a long time. And I've always wanted to aspire to do definitely more. So I applied for a job and I have a degree in computer science. And I was told I didn't have the qualifications. So I got into it with the inspector at the time. And they threatened to charge me under the Police Act for insubordination and all kinds of things that they do. And that was the turning point. I said, I am responsible for my own destiny and where I am today. If I stay here, then I'm complicit and I'm consenting to this. So it's my fault. So do something about it. So I kid you not, I got my applications out and I applied. Now here, the part which was difficult is because I'm working full time and I want to get out of there. So I thought I'm going to apply to law school and I'm going to roll the dice and see if I can get in. And Ryan kind of said it. The cost of the LSAT, the time commitment, everything. I thought, okay, maybe I'll do it part-time, this and that. I applied to one of the two schools in the Toronto area. And I went through this whole song and dance. And incredibly, as a mature student, they wouldn't accept me. And then I saw a newspaper article not too long ago about, all of the applicants that have applied to this particular school, only 3% are Black. Or not even 3%, sorry, 1% was Black. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I have, at least policing experience and this and that. I've never been in trouble. I work hard. I've got a brain in my head, couldn't get in. So I said, paralegal school, here I come. So I applied to different paralegal schools and I got into Centennial College. Loved it. Fantastic school. Best time. So I quietly changed my shifts to work straight nights and I went to school in the day. I didn't care if it killed me. I'm getting out of the policing profession. So that's what I did. And I graduated and I got my paralegal designation, and then I sat on it for about a year. And then after that, I just thought, you know what? One day I just said, I've had enough of this place and the craziness and just the unfairness and the craziness. I'm finished. I'm done. And I officially retired on February the 14th, 2018. And I chose that day because I said, if there's anybody who loves themselves, I have to love myself. So I did it on that day. It was very symbolic for me. And I had a game plan that I will never, ever work for anybody ever again. Never. No way, no how. Not what I've been through with these guys. I'm not going to work for anybody. So it was a bit of a tough battle because Deborah said it. There is no one to help. No one. And luckily, I was really lucky because as a police officer, I did what was right. I never, did anything wrong to anybody or anything. So I have a good reputation. And even many of my clients, I've even arrested. Like that's the kind of relationship I had with a lot of people. I was always fair out there. So so I was able to at least get my practice going, and the calls started coming in, and I started off with my small office, and I was actually pretty lucky because it just kept going and going and going. So I didn't have as much difficulties as others. But ironically, even in the jurisdiction that I worked in, there were some people that were very surprised. They didn't know that I had switched from policing. Now I'm on an advocacy side. And I had, there was one particular person in the justice system. She laughed at me. She goes, now you're on that side. And, just was condescending about it. And I actually had a few issues actually with some judges and justices of the peace who were very condescending and not nice and not civil and would try to make you look stupid in front of people. And I'm a very assertive person, and I'm not having it. Like, I'm going to be civil also to the line, but I'm not going to get walked over either. So, the racism and the discrimination in the justice system is just the other side now. So I've seen the side of bad officers doing bad things to people, and now I see how the triers of fact and different people, how you interact within the system now treat racialized people. I do human rights complaints, and that's my number 3 in my business here. And I would say 95% of my clients are Black against some government agency that has wronged them. And I can't obviously tell the stories. Every story that I sometimes hear, I can't even believe. And then I hear the next one. And I cannot believe how government agencies treat Black people. It is atrocious. And then when it comes to children, double atrocious. So, I've always said that if I'm going to do anything in my life, I'm going to make it a better place. And I'm certainly going to advocate for people who need that help and who really, really need that help. So often I have payment plans for people. I really, really try to make sure that I can represent people to the best of my ability and to skew it to their income. I'm lucky because you know what? I left Durham Police with a pension. I'm lucky. So money in that sense is not as much as an issue for me because I have a backup. But I'm trying to give that back to people by saying, hey, I'm here. This is what I do, and this is how I can help you. So gone through a lot of racism. I cannot lie. The police force put me through a lot. And, even went to therapy. Cannot lie. It is horrendous, the things that I've seen and experienced and was treated. So I saved myself and I'm a better person today. So I took a little bit of what I've learned and now I'm giving it back in a private capacity. So that's a little bit about, I hope I answered the question. May have gone on a tangent, but that's a little bit about that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Leon. And I see a question here, and I'll start with you, Ryan, from one of my students. Given your experiences and certainly applicable to your subject area, what is the approach you have if you have a client that is a Black person and you see that their rights are not being they're gone unprotected? How do you feel now, given your own experiences, Ryan, where you're dealing with an employment issue where they're being maybe wrongfully dismissed or they're facing harassment or discrimination, given your own experiences?
Well, when those type of cases come across my desk, you're torn. You're torn for your client and what they're experiencing, but at the same time, you're grateful for the fact that they have somebody that they can look to, and it's like a reflection in the mirror. Oftentimes, and I think this is one of the most tragic things about not seeing people of color in the legal profession, representative of the society that we live in, is that people can't go, racialized people can't go to a lawyer or a paralegal and find somebody that looks like them oftentimes, right? We're just underrepresented compared to our population. And so when I have a client come in that is racialized, I'm so happy to be able to help them to know what they're going through and what they're experiencing is some of the same things that I've experienced in my life. And I think it makes me a better lawyer and a better advocate on their behalf. And so we need more. We need more lawyers of color, paralegals of color to come up through the system to be able to represent people of color in society. We need more. We need to break through those barriers.
And Deborah, anything from your perspective and what you've been doing as a paralegal?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with what Ryan is saying. In my practice, it was always a joy to be able to help people who look like me. And I have a lot of my colleagues would tell me that I have a bleeding heart because it would always be about helping them and less about the money. And it wasn't great for business, but it was good for my heart. And I just felt like these people, what else can they do? Where else are they going to go? Especially when it comes to instances where there is discrimination, it's very clear. There is racism. And, it's like human rights tribunal matter where what else are they going to do if they go by themselves? They're not going to succeed. It's so difficult. Even with as a representative, it's difficult to advocate for people there. One of the issues that I notice with the human rights tribunal is that racism is something that they often tell you needs to be proven, which, as you know, if you've ever experienced it, it's sometimes hard to prove. It's not with those microaggressions. It's hard to say that this is the reason why they're treating me this way. If you've never experienced it, if you don't have a lifetime of experiencing that, you can't understand it. And so I think not only do we need to have more people, more legal representatives that are Black and racialized, we also need people in those spaces like the Human Rights Tribunal who can understand. And a lot of times they aren't there. And I think it's really a shame, and it makes it really difficult for people to get access to real justice. I mean, we call it the justice system, but I mean, I don't think it's aptly named, to be honest.
And Leon, certainly you shared 95% of your clients there at the Human Rights Tribunal are Black. How does that, given your experience and what you shared with us earlier today, how does that help you represent those individuals?
Very good question. It's easier to represent somebody and to 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 put their issue onto paper when you've actually lived it, right? We live it every day, but when somebody's telling me the story, my head is nodding. Yeah, I get it. Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. There doesn't have to be any overt explanation or you know what I mean, or those types of things. I get it. And my job is to take those statements and sentiments and put it onto paper, and to make compelling arguments of why there's discrimination and how the discrimination occurred, and what the remedies are. So it's I believe it's because I've so lived it, right from childhood right through to where I am today. Who better can advocate than somebody who's lived it?
And so maybe we'll start with you, Ryan. How can we change the system, right? How can we, and certainly it's excellent having three people here, amazing at what you're doing with your experiences and your success stories, providing that story there, that mentorship for those coming up through the system to see, look, there is a partner downtown Toronto who's extremely successful. There are two paralegals here. One's created the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. Another has transformed from what the experience that he has had, and are succeeding. What can you share in terms of what you think we can do to change the conversation, to change the system, Ryan?
Well, I think you're exactly right, JP. I think it starts with mentorship, right? And what Deborah has created. Kudos to you, because that's exactly what we need. We need that people of color can have somebody to look up to say, "Hey, I can do this too. If they did it, certainly I can as well." And I think it starts with there, kind of bringing that hope to society that we can certainly get there. I think as well, what we need to do is break down some of those systemic barriers. So like I said, you have the law school test, which is kind of the funnel of having students come in through the system, right? And so that test has been around forever, and no one really challenges why do we have it. I mean, it's not a test that certainly test any academic ability. We're talking about logical games and reading comprehension passages that don't even relate to law, right? And so I think we need to look at some of those barriers to access to becoming a lawyer, to becoming a paralegal, and what we can do to change them, because the reasons why we have some of them are nonsensical. And so by doing those two things, by building up mentorship programs, by looking at some of the systemic areas, and how we can change those barriers, I think we can finally start to tackle the system. And the Black Lives Matter movement that took place across last summer is just the start of the conversation, right? We still have a long way to go. And what I'm encouraged by, at least a little bit, is that at least in the legal sphere, some of these law firms are starting to take notice that they can no longer operate by the status quo. We can no longer hire people that we believe fit our culture. We have to become diverse. And so you're starting to see baby steps in that area, but we still have a long way to go.
And Deborah, anything from your perspective that you can add?
Yeah, I would agree with the fact that it starts at the bottom. Like I mentioned before, a lot of it is this lack of confidence. A lot of people, if you don't see people who look like you don't think you can do it. It's the way we're bred. Like, it's just, if you don't see it, why would I see myself there? I haven't, even my own experience just recently, over the summer, I had a few colleagues advise me to apply for public appointment for the Legal Aid Board of Ontario. And my first instinct was, I'm not qualified. That was my first instinct. I was like, I don't think I could do it. Why would you ask me to do it? And I almost didn't apply. And then last minute, I said, you know what, I'll just do it. I applied, I filled out my application, and I was actually appointed to the board in January. But had I not had that encouragement from colleagues, I wouldn't have done it. If I hadn't had those people who believed that I could do it and even called me and took the time to, and multiple times call me and encourage me to do it, I wouldn't have done it. And so I really believe that that sense of encouragement is what a lot of us need. And if we don't have it, because we don't have it growing up, a lot of times we're told, we're expected to do less than we're capable of, and sometimes told that we can't, and sometimes told that, you know, you're not going to amount to anything. Some of us will internalize it and not end up being able to do anything with our lives. Some of us, you know, it just maybe knocks us down a few pegs. We'll get out there and do it anyway, but not as much as we could have. I really believe that if we have that mentorship, it will combat that. It'll reverse that psychology, and you'll just have better access, you know, and you'll have more confidence, and you'll see more students engaged. You'll walk into these classrooms and see more racialized students. That's where it starts. And I'm saying not even just college, even as early as high school and maybe even junior high, grade 7 and 8. I think they need to see what they're capable of.
And Leon?
Yeah, just taking off from what Deborah was saying, you know, it starts very, very early in public school and in the primary grades that you ask, you know, some kids, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? You know, do we get aspirations that I want to be a police officer? Do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to be a rap star? Or do I want to be a basketball player, professional basketball player? You know, it starts very, very early on how kids are socialized, and also expectations, because I even remember when I was a child, you know, the principal said, oh, you know, he'll make a great basketball player one day, you know, like those are the things that are placed into children's minds, and that's all they feel that they can achieve. I wholeheartedly believe that we tend to project. If you see something, you try to sort of place yourself there. So if you were to see a police officer, say for instance, that you looked up to, and it was, say, a Black police officer, and you're a Black person, you would likely want to aspire to be that person. It's just a common thing, a common sense thing. Same being a lawyer or any profession, right? And the problem is that we often do not have enough people in those echelons, if I would call it, to look up to. And you know, our job, I believe, you know, Deborah, my job, and Ryan's job is to put our hand out and to bring up as many people as we can. Because ultimately, the more people that we can have in our echelon, overall, the better society will be, because it will start to equalize a little bit more when there's more people. But when you see, you know, even I agree with Deborah. Maybe there was 2 other Black people in my class out of, I don't know, 70, 80. The numbers are so low. So we need to encourage more people to say, yes, you can do this. Yes, you have the aptitude to do this. Yes, you could be anything you want if you put your mind to it and have the right direction and have the right path. And I think that's also another thing with many racialized people, is that we don't have the power, number one, and number two, we don't know the path, right? We don't know the path. Like, say, even just, you know, just a random example, you know, you say you have a bad interaction with some sort of government agency or police or whatever. What do you do? How do you deal with this? You know, and often most people, or a lot of people, they just throw it on Facebook and they have this rage on Facebook. And that's it. They had their, they were, maybe illegally stopped and somebody filmed it and put it on Facebook. And that's it. That's where it ends. No, maybe it needs to be investigated, or maybe, it's a human rights complaint or something. We don't know how to maneuver in the system. So that's our job, is to assist people on how to maneuver the system and how to advocate people within the system, because many have no clue. And that's a problem in itself.
Now, thank you all of you for taking the time and joining us here today. And what I want maybe to leave a question for all three of you is, what advice do you have for any of my students or anyone listening who are looking up to people like you who are hugely successful in the legal field, and or they may be experiencing, we've read so many stories, we've seen so many things about in the legal profession, what is going on, and we've shared how to help change the system. But what can you share directly with upcoming Black paralegals or Black lawyers or anyone listening? And certainly one of the things that Deborah highlighted, it's great to see Black people who are in high school teaching, providing examples at a young age for what you can accomplish. So what can you share, maybe starting with you, Ryan, as to how to overcome these issues or microaggressions and become successful in the legal field?
I would say, get connected, band together, do what Deborah has done, start an organization, pull everybody together and say, collectively with one voice, we're not going to take this anymore. The numbers and, the access to justice, they're not right. And things need to change. Once you can elevate your collective voice, that's when things start to get heard. It only started to get better when, as Black Lives Matter, as it was a collective protest in the streets where people had to take notice, right? And so get together, reach out to us. Certainly, I'm available, to bounce any ideas off of. So reach out to us, reach out to any other colleagues. Sometimes I know when I was starting out, because there wasn't many, Black lawyers, I would reach out to, partners randomly and said, "Hey, let me pick your brain. Like, how did you get to where you're at?" You do have people out there. We may be only a few, unfortunately, but we are out there. So reach out to us, and we'll do everything we can to pull you up, like Leon has said.
And Deborah, and perhaps you can highlight as well, Deborah, some of the things that are coming up again with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals.
Yes, I wanted to say I definitely agree with what Ryan says about, even in high school, creating some type of group or some type of club based on what you're interested in. And also, it's really important to follow your instincts, because even if you are hearing or you're not seeing what it is that you want to be, if you're feeling it, follow your instincts. Just because you don't see someone there, I really think that you could be the first one. Why not? It starts with somebody. So I think it's really important to follow your instincts when it comes to what you want to do for a career path. For the Paralegal Association, we are definitely looking for student members at some point. That'll be closer to the end of next year, or sorry, the end of this year. And student members will be able to be involved in some of the decision-making processes. We want to be able to pick their brains about what it is that they're looking for when it comes to assistance and guidance, when it comes to trying to figure out where they want to go to law school, or even if they just want to be working in the legal field, not necessarily as a representative. So we definitely want to engage with students. So I would really encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, check out our website. We have the webinar series coming up about navigating racism and discrimination in the workplace. You're welcome to attend. For students, it will be free. So we definitely want to make sure that you come in and take a look and just feel it out and see if this is something that's for you. And this goes for high school students and for college students as well.
And Leon?
And just taking off of both what Ryan and Deborah said, it's really, really important. If there's one thing that I've learned, and maybe that's part of the success of my firm, is networking. Okay, and networking in all kinds of different things. Either the volunteership, maybe join a service club, or Black Paralegal Club, anything, but get out there and network. That is key. And mentoring also, find somebody or even a group of people where you can pick their brain is immensely important. I didn't have a lot of people to pick brains, but I do have some mentors, obviously. I wouldn't be here where I am if I didn't also ask people who have more experience than I do in certain aspects to assist me in my legal firm. So it's important to get under the wing of somebody, and don't be shy to call one of us up and say, hey, you know what, I have a question, or can I meet up with you, and do you have time to talk about something? Or even just pick up the phone, right? Or bring a coffee. I love coffee. So stuff like that. So start the rapport and just and say, hey, you know what, I want to be just like you. How can I do it? How did you do it? Right? And I am positive that all three of us would be more than happy to help anyone to aspire to be successful, because that reflects on us. That if you're successful because you've spoken to us, you've taken our advice, you've done things properly, and now you're getting the fruits of the advice and good decisions.
Perfect. So once again, I'd like to thank all three of you for taking the time and sharing your stories and sharing your advice. And again, this is something that it's not going to happen certainly overnight. And as you've all mentioned, that it's going to take a collective effort. And for those listening, whether it is any Black student, any student of color, or any allies in this change, we need everyone's support. And everyone to work together to change the system, and whether it's in the legal field, whether it's in the policing, whether it's in teaching, wherever it is, that we need to band together. And I think the strength there from the collective is going to go a long way to helping accomplish this change. And thank you, all three of you, again for being part of the conversation today, and certainly and Ryan and Leon's case for joining us again. It's been great to have you, and thank you, Deborah, for coming on. And certainly I'd look to talking with you again and in the future, and we can update and see the progress, and especially encourage with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals that there are opportunities there, and certainly want to encourage all of my students to take part and be able to get the mentorship from people like you, Deborah, as well as Leon and Ryan. And thanks again for everyone for tuning in. And certainly, if this is the first time you're tuning in, we have different speakers every weekday at 5 o'clock typically. And so you can find other people in the profession that you can look up to and see what's worked for them. And I encourage you to tune in every weekday, 5 o'clock. Thanks again, everyone. And thanks to our wonderful panel.